One of the things you're trying to promote is this hospital comfort kit.
When we were in the hospital, everybody that was reaching out to us was saying, "We'll do anything. What do you need?" And we had no answer. And then they would send us flowers or they would send us candy. You know, after a couple of months in the hospital, it's just like, all right, enough candy. Then I started to think about the gifts that we received that were really helpful. It just occurred to me that, boy, it would be great for people, especially those that aren't familiar with long hospital stays, to get a basket that was geared toward being stuck in a hospital. Little Bluetooth speaker, a water bottle. It all comes in a cooler. Sometimes you want something that's cold. It's handy to have a cooler. Back scratcher, chapstick, and then on top of that, a hospital survival guide with identification for items that we didn't include in the kit that they may want to bring from home, like a pillow, but bring one with a different pillowcase so it doesn't get taken by the staff when they go to change things around.
That gives the recognition of thoughts and prayers, but also some utility, I guess, at the same time.
Exactly.
That'll be available in late May.
Yeah, we'll be getting our first round of inventory within 2 weeks.
All right, very good. Welcome to the E6S Methods podcast with Jacob and Aaron, your weekly dose of tips and tricks to achieve excellent performance in your business and career. Join us as we explore deeper into the practical worlds of Lean, Six Sigma, project management, and design thinking. In this episode number 199, we continue with Speaking Upwards with TEDxer Raymond Poole and talk about public speaking in the workplace. If you're just tuning in for the first time, find all our back episodes on our podcast table of contents at e6s-methods.com. If you like this episode, be sure to click the like link in the show notes. It's easy. Just tap our logo, click, and you're done. Tap, click, done. Here we go. Right. Hey, thanks for that. I know basically a lot of the questions I've just been asking are out of my curiosity and how to deal well with the trials of humanity. I think they apply to the office, but more to the point, I think let's get to it. We're calling this one Speaking Upwards, and this is about your path through public speaking and how to try to bring it back to the careers of Lean and Six Sigma and project management and those in business. So I thought maybe we'd go through your career and how public speaking evolved over that time.
Sure.
If you think back to one of your first public speaking engagements, and I guess I might be even talking in elementary school. You think back to that. What how did it go? Or maybe even as an engineer, think back to the first presentation you did to management. You're out of school. The safety net's gone. How did you prepare? How did you feel leading up to it? And how did it go?
I think, I do want to share a little bit of a story for when I was in junior high. I had to memorize the national anthem and present it in front of the class. We all did. And I went up there and I recited it faster than I think anybody has ever recited the national anthem in pretty much in the history of the United States. As I went through it, I just got faster and faster and faster. And by the end, like, people in the class were literally laughing. And it didn't bother me so much because I'm not shy, but I knew it sounded ridiculous. But the whole idea was I was trying to get it out before I forgot it. I practiced it so much. And yes, I was nervous, but I just wanted to get the next line before I forgot it. And, and I've always been a little bit of a fast talker, and I still have to meter myself back at times. But that was kind of the first one that I remember. And I know my biggest concern was always, are you going to remember what you have to say?
Mm-hmm.
And when I first had to do a presentation in a corporate setting, I was a manufacturing engineer at the time, and I led a lot of our Lean Six Sigma efforts. It was Remington Electric Shavers in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And my role had been up to that point to be the manufacturing engineering contact on the Lean Six Sigma initiative that we'd moved forward with. And also it had been to support the production, in the process for cutting systems. So I went to the first presentation, and this was actually just a technical presentation, just trying to show management that, cross-functional management, this is what we've been working on.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in there fully prepared to answer all the technical questions. And I was researching my topic, making sure I understood everything to the nth degree. And we went in there, and when I got in there and they started to ask questions, I remembered questioning myself on all of the things that I wasn't supposed to say politically. And that was the thing that I felt like a deer in headlights, because I could present the technical stuff, and then I was so caught up in the wording of things to say that we had struggled to develop something. Well, when we were practicing, I remember, oh yeah, our director of ops had said, don't say we struggled to develop it. We we figured this out. Or, issues that we were 90% done with, I had to present them in a certain way with certain terminology. And that was where the panic started to sink in. And as I'm trying to present this, I'm recognizing I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I found myself not being very direct and not getting the point across. And it was horrible. And that was the biggest concern. It wasn't because I lacked any of the technical knowledge. The problem was I wasn't prepared for the type of questions that might come out. And when it was time to answer those questions, I was concerned that I might answer them using a wrong phrase or a wrong word that wouldn't be appreciated by my boss or my boss's boss. So that was my major concern when I first started with presentations.
So was that all hogwash, or was that something you really needed to polish up as you were going through?
Well, I definitely needed to polish up my speech. But for me, it was about anticipating what questions that they would ask, and having a better written out, prepared response. So beforehand, I was thinking, okay, if they ask this, I know the answer. But afterwards, it was like, okay, if they ask this, I'll try to word a response like this, and I jot it down. And just having it jotted down on my notepad, when the question came up, I was able to answer it more clearly. So for me, that was the first step in getting better at speaking at an organization.
Yeah, and that's one of the key is to, when you're in that forum, is to try to anticipate any objections and see if you can head them off at the pass before they even come up. Exactly.
And honestly, heading them off at the pass was more the next thing that I learned.
Okay.
Because once I got into project management, you go into these discussions with an idea that you've got this great project and you want to present it. And sure, you can answer all the questions, but you also find that sometimes management can take themselves down a path, even if you have decent answers for a particular question. So that was really the point where I recognized, okay, let's make sure that we structure these slides in an order that when I raise a question, I'm answering it on the next slide, not at the end of the presentation. Having an understanding of what questions are going to come up and when gave me a better understanding. Okay, you know what, if you're going to bring up delayed equipment delivery, how will, the next slide, I've got to talk about how that's going to impact the project timeline, the mitigations we're taking, the risks, how those have changed. And once I present that, you see the level of tension in the room drop a little bit. And sure, they have follow-up questions and that sort of thing, but just having it with the right structure doesn't leave them with this question on their head, distracting them for the rest of your presentation.
Right. Yeah, that's a good tactic. Has there been a time that you had to use that forum as a way to persuade in a direction that may have been unpopular?
Well, I think for a lot of our projects that we had to present, there were always opposing views, right? So there were always the folks that felt things were good as they were and the folks that were really driving for change. Now, when you're running projects, typically you're on the change side of that discussion.
Right.
So when presenting those things, a big part was understanding, okay, well, who's my audience? And, who are the individuals that are going to be really concerned with this level of change? So a lot of times I found myself, especially for risks and mitigations, trying to gear that around, okay, well, what's Tom going to say when I bring this thing up? How do I better prepare myself, have a slide ready to address that? And also just, at the same time, still being aware of, that culture in your facility and what's that word that you shouldn't use? Like we always had different words that we were trying to avoid because our general manager, for instance, didn't like the term vendor. They liked supplier because a vendor sounded like somebody selling street meat. So you are aware of these little eccentricities of these individuals, and you're never going to get them all right. And it's not, in the same way, in the beginning of my career, I was so concerned with trying to address everything perfectly. Later, you recognize, okay, well, as long as you're aware of it and you do your best to address this this concern, then either the idea will stand and you'll have the right support or you won't. But at some point, you've got to recognize that, some of these are just terms that don't have the same kind of meaning that you're worried they do.
Yeah, and I think that's a great tactic, because basically what you're doing is you're trying to craft the message so that it doesn't block, or craft the delivery so that it doesn't block what the message actually is, so that people don't get hung up on what word you use, because it happens. You can get hung up on these things, and just, if it's really that close to your mind or close to your heart, you're just going to stop listening to the rest of it. And so that's part of getting to them emotionally beyond whatever the data are saying, and getting to cutting straight to the heart without hitting those speed bumps.
Yes, and and it's so much. I've found that so much of that slide, preparing your slide deck and walking everybody through it is, to try to avoid, them getting distracted, them thinking about something else, them going off on a tangent, and focusing people on, this is the end result that we're going for. This is the change that we're trying to drive to. Giving them a vision of what that end stage could look like, and then kind of walking them through how to get there. Mm-hmm. And I found, just at during different discussions, it's worth periodically sprinkling in, this is what the end stage looks like, especially when you're talking to folks that are very risk averse.
So when you've been in some of these, and maybe there's been multiple readouts, what would you say, looking at some of your colleagues or even yourself, or some of the more common mistakes people make in this venue?
I think, at one point I was, I would run the project approval meeting. So we'd have upper management there, and we'd have all the project engineers coming out and presenting their projects. So many of our project engineers, like beforehand, I'd help them with their slides and kind of walk through, okay, this is how we want to present it. But I think my biggest drive was every slide needs to be one step closer to that conclusion that you're driving. Mm-hmm. And when you pull that slide up, don't go and read it mechanically, because people can read the slide. They're going to be not paying as much attention to you as they might otherwise pay attention. But if you can go up there, have this slide up there, and really get to the root of, I've got this slide to show you that financially it makes sense to move forward with this project. I've got this next slide to essentially show you that the risks are minimal, particularly when it comes to inventory or quality control or something along those lines. And I feel like so many people get so bogged down in the details that they don't even recognize that half the people in that room are not engineers. They don't know the project as well as you do. You want to give them that one takeaway that says, hey, this project makes financial sense, or this project is on schedule, or this project will be done by this date. And all of those ideas, all of the other facts that you have on that slide are just supporting that one takeaway that you've got.
Right.
And if they just take away one takeaway per slide, in the end, they're going to walk away with the idea that, hey, this is a pretty good project. Let's move forward. And that's kind of what I would always stress to everybody. Just one solid takeaway per slide, and people will pay attention and read the other stuff as they see fit. They'll ask you questions on it, but just know that you've got that to back you up.
So I guess knowing that when you go in there, that the goal in such a venue is the wrong thing to do is show them how smart you are, and the right thing to do is just get the message across very clearly.
Exactly right. Yes.
What if you have mixed crowd in you're in the situation where you've got executives all the way down to, finance people, engineers, hourly, maybe union frontline workers. You've got a mixed crowd. Does that change your approach at all?
It's sometimes it varies the content a bit. I think one thing that is common across everything is everybody wants to see somebody present with confidence. Nobody wants to see anybody up there faltering and questioning their own presentation. They want to see people go up there, have solid answers, and if they don't have a specific answer to a specific question, put that on the side and say, I'll come back, I'll answer that, by such and such a date. So I feel like the general push for those presentations are the same. Now, at the same time, when I'm looking at a presentation to hourly folks, more often than not, they're focused on how their specific job might change.
Right.
And when I'm talking to executives, most of them are focused on either high-level directional ideas or will this project deliver? And, and obviously risk, everybody's got a bit of a concern for risk. So, I let that affect the content of what I'm presenting. But again, the more mixed the crowd is, the more I try to take a general step back with how I present it, and then maybe sometimes throw in a very specific comment for specific groups in the crowd. But be aware that I don't want to go off on a tangent and be talking about overhead costs for 5 minutes on a slide when you really only have one finance guy that cares about it. It's a matter of trying to balance that. Okay, we've got this mixed crowd. We want to have that takeaway. But if he really wants to ask that question, he can ask it, at the end of the slide or at the end of the presentation.
Did you find that your style or message, how much different would it have to be in speaking with customers?
Customers, to me, one of the things that I learned a lot when
are we talking B2B? I guess I'm talking about when you're a product manager. Are we talking
Yes.
B2B at this point?
Yeah, we're talking business to business. I started as a product manager for substation transformers and a particular dielectric fluid that we were producing. It was a biodegradable dielectric fluid.
Okay.
So these, so it's a very technical product. We're selling to purchasing folks and to other engineers, or to purchasing folks that were engineers. So they know the product fairly well. For me, when it came down to presenting our product specifically or an idea, I found so much more was about personally connecting with folks and showing them that not only were we competent, but we were there to support that partnership. And for me, the thing that I focused on more was, if we're trying to make a personal connection with these folks, you're using more vocal variety, you're using more eye contact. And I think that was really the point when I recognized having that ability to talk to a room that's like a mid-sized room of 10 to 12 people has got quite a bit of value, because you go into these areas and you've got obviously opportunities to sell person to person, or to have you and your salesperson next to you while you talk to one other guy. But when you've got a room of like 12 people or so, you've got to scan the room. You're trying to make eye contact and you're explaining these different points to different people. You're identifying the people that are a little bit less engaged and trying to figure out the way to get them a little bit more engaged. Because so much of being a product manager is, obviously you've got the strategic piece and trying to determine, the direction. But at the same time, if you're going out to see a customer, you want to have a decent relationship. And I feel like having that eye contact, being able to connect with them sometimes before and after the meeting, and be able to present in a certain way that they say, okay, these guys really know what's going on, and they're genuine in saying that they're here to support that partnership. Well, I know a lot of people can sometimes struggle when they're going into customer facility and trying to talk to a customer who's a little skeptical and try to convince them that, hey, I'm here to support you, without trying to sound too salesy.
Right.
So I think, so from what I've always found is, when in those situations, having more eye contact, trying to have more of a personal connection, and, having a little bit more of an interactive session, showing a little bit more personality, I found that helps a little bit more than just going up there and doing a stiff presentation.
So you're at the customer, you've given your pitch. They say, okay, that's very nice. You're very smooth and charismatic salesman, extension of sales.
Yeah.
But I want to talk to your top scientists, get them in here and have them speak. So first, what's your gut reaction to that? And then second, how do you prepare that scientist?
I think it's a great thing to get your scientists in there, get your engineers in there, and have them connect on a level where they really feel like, okay, these people have a technical competence that they can really not only support us, but they're not blowing smoke. Like, this is all legit, the things that they're saying to us. So one of the products we were actually driving, it was after I transitioned to overhead transmission conductor. We were driving this new product. It was E3X, and the idea was that it was a coating that helped the conductor run at lower temperatures, which drives less losses, which drives higher efficiency. So you could either get a smaller conductor and use the same current, or you can use the same size conductor and lose less power as you run current through that line.
Mm-hmm.
So our entire strategy for that tour was all based around the engineer that developed that technology.
Mm-hmm.
When we went from site to site, we went in, the salesperson, did some introductions, and we shifted the presentation over to him right away, because I think so much in the way where we were talking earlier just about anticipating questions. When you're talking new technology in an industry where people are not particularly excited about change, they were pretty averse to change. You start out, our goal was, we're going to start out with an engineer. We're going to start out with somebody that can explain things in simple terms. And he had a very well thought through presentation,
mm-hmm.
but he wasn't presenting animation. He was presenting real test data, test video. And he was showing people, hey, you know what? We're getting you in early because you're a trusted partner. And that led into my discussions with them as, hey, you know what? Not only am I saying you're a trusted partner, but I can prove it, because here we are developing this product. It's not for sale yet, and we're talking to you about it.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me was that to me was the value of trying to understand this is the kind of industry that we're in. This is the kind of questions that we're going to get, and I'm not going to go into something like this if I think that they're going to directly ask for an engineer to come address the problem. I'm not going to come in and try to cover it and try to avoid that. I just want an engineer who's prepared that could come in and present it with the confidence that he really did present that well. And especially by the time we were closer to market, I mean, he had that presentation down. I couldn't have done it any better than he did.
So you talked about confidence, and did that confidence just come with their knowledge in the subject matter, or did any confidence need to be developed in terms of speaking publicly?
I think obviously everybody's different. I feel like with engineers, and maybe it's just my own journey. In the beginning, it's, hey, do I have confidence in myself to know that I've got a good understanding of this technical product, especially because you're often in an industry where you've got other engineers you're presenting to. Maybe they're not working as an engineer. Maybe they're working as a purchasing agent, but they're working with you, and you don't want to wing it. You want to be able to answer the tough questions. And I think once you get through that, I think so much of it just comes down to anticipating questions and being prepared for it. And if it takes this turn, we're going to say this. And if it goes that way, so much of it is done before you even get in there.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying, okay, I'm going to prepare for all of these different things. And then at the same time, when we would go into customers, you would have a salesperson, and I would be there as well. And you're all trying to basically read the room and respond in the most appropriate way that's going to answer their question. And you start to get to know each other, so if this question is going to stump the person next to you and when the right time to jump in might be.
So a lot of sales folks would be concerned about having an engineer there. One, because they can't really control the exact words that come out of that person's mouth.
Yeah.
Are they going to spill the beans on something we didn't want them to say? Or are they going to, come across some way? So it doesn't sound like you had this issue with this particular person. Are there other engineers within the same org, and you'd say there's no way I'm going to put them in front of the customer?
I've had other engineers that I really wouldn't have wanted to, but at the same time, they were either the top expert on that particular subject matter, or the customer already knew them and requested them. So I have had that situation. I think the key is preparation.
Mm-hmm.
The key is to sit down in advance, and whether it's anticipating questions, whether it's just kind of going through and saying, hey, this is the idea we're presenting. I understand that these things might be possibilities, but our goal isn't to try to say, isn't to try to say A, B, or C. Our goal is to say D, right? So you can go through and you can talk to them, and obviously you go into the customer and you want to be as honest as possible, but at the same time, depending on who you're talking to and who you bring in, theoretically, we had some engineers that could answer questions very theoretically and say, well, technically, yeah, I suppose that is possible, and get people worried about something that's a 1% chance of happening. So with that engineer in particular, the whole idea was just to present to him, hey, this is these are the probabilities. So this is why we're saying this. We know that this isn't that likely, right? Do you agree? Do you not agree? And in the end, I think so much of it just comes down to coming to common terms with, okay, these are the types of questions. These are the answers that we agree that we're going to approach it this way. And, it's still, the question goes to that engineer and your heart still stops for a second and wonders, like, what's he going to say? But in the end, I honestly feel it's way better to have that person in the meeting with that level of expertise rather than to have just the folks that, myself, were sometimes, especially, by the time I was a product manager, I was definitely not to that level of depth on the theoretical and technical functioning of transient voltage through a transformer or something along those lines. So, to have that support there shows the customer, hey, we're a partnership. We're trying to get you the best information. We're bringing you one of our best guys over here to explain it to you. So, yeah, it sometimes causes a little, a little stress. But in the end, I feel like if it's a difficult enough situation, a tough enough question that you want to get your best engineers with their best engineers, just take the time and prepare for it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and you, like it or not, even though you're an engineer background, you crossed over to the top line side of sales and marketing, and that reduces your credibility in that space. So
definitely,
you got to bring over the guy that they don't think could possibly lie.
Yes, absolutely, and I think there is definitely some confidence that it inspires to bring somebody who might not be as polished to just come out and say, this is what works, this is what doesn't work. And that holds a certain, it provides a certain, confidence for the customer to recognize, yeah, they're not going to come in here and this guy clearly isn't a polished, prepared speaker that's coming in here and telling us that all our ideas are terrible and we shouldn't have asked the dumb question. So at the same time, there's good and bad that comes with that.
So you've gotten your polish within the organization and moved through the ranks in business. You took off your engineering hat, took off your marketing hat, and now you've put on your CF cornerman hat. What from that business experience were you able to carry forward into a different venue, and what was different?
I think for me, what I brought from engineering was and from marketing was a singular focus. If I'm delivering a speech, like for instance, when I delivered the TEDx talk, my goal was to talk about realistic optimism, to try to give examples of it, to try to walk people through how I came to these conclusions and try to get people to kind of come with us on that journey and come out the other side and say, yes, like this perspective makes a lot of sense because of all of these reasons. And when you start to do that, you have that singular focus and you end up trying to pull out all of this extra fluff. And there was a lot that I ended up having to pull out of that speech. But in the end, I think it makes you more focused on the point that you're trying to make. So I felt that was what I brought from the engineering background, and also, just the fact that you have the confidence of saying, you know what, this is my experience, this is what I know, and I can explain this to somebody just from the sheer number of years that you do that.
Thanks for listening to episode 199 of the E6S Methods podcast. Stay tuned for episode 200, part 3 of our Speaking Upwards series with TEDxer Raymond Poole. Don't forget to click like or dislike for this episode in the show notes. Tap click done. If you have a question, comment, or advice, leave a note in the comment section or contact us directly. Feel free to email me, Aaron, AARON, at E6S-methods.com or on our website. We reply to all messages. If you heard something you like, then share us with a friend or leave a review. Didn't like what you heard? Join our LinkedIn group and tell us why. Don't forget, you can find notes and graphics for all shows and more at www.e6s-methods.com. Journey through success. If you're not climbing up, you're falling down.